She hit Putin hard. Moscow was left with nothing. China is sharply cutting its purchases of Russian oil. Putin is in shock. A diplomatic bomb is in action. A historic summit. The US and China are changing the rules of the game. Russia is being put in its place. The Kremlin's collapse is just around the corner. I'll tell you all the details in just a moment. Hello, this is Ukraine Today, and I'm Victoria Panchenko with the latest events. A global shock. China has made a complete U-turn, and Moscow was left with nothing. Instead of support, the Kremlin got a slap in the face. Beijing cold-bloodedly threw its ally overboard. A sensational twist. Xi did the unexpected. On October 30th, during the APEC summit in South Korea, the president of China will meet with Donald Trump. The US president states that the leaders will discuss China's reduction of Russian oil imports. Trump noted that the situation is already developing in favor of reducing Russia's oil revenues and added that India has completely stopped buying oil from the Russian Federation.
But do you know what China is doing? I don't know, you probably saw it today. China is significantly cutting its purchases of Russian oil, and India is cutting them completely. And we've already imposed sanctions.
The American leader also expressed confidence in the prospects for trade agreements with Beijing. According to him, both sides have a very good chance to reach a large-scale and mutually beneficial agreement. Sanctions, the possible authorization to use US long-range weapons deep inside Russia, and the refusal to meet with Putin in Budapest. It seems that Donald Trump is seriously angry with the Kremlin dictator. How will recent events affect Russia and Ukraine? Does the key role really belong to the US, and what role does China play? Watch more details in the following report.
The cancellation of the meeting in Budapest, the green light for strikes with British and French long-range missiles on Russian territory, and sanctions against the two largest oil companies in the country. The gas station nation. Donald Trump has finally seen the light and decided to crush Putin. What is really happening in the White House?
I've always felt that Putin wants everything, not just a part. I think now he's ready to negotiate. We don't want him to get everything.
As soon as the Oval Office gave the green light, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee sprang into action as well. There, they supported 3 legislative initiatives aimed against Russia, which started the war in Ukraine. Among other things, this includes recognizing the Russian Federation as a state sponsor of terrorism and the use of frozen assets. However, the Senate itself admits that it's not possible to vote on these bills due to the government shutdown. Nevertheless, in just one day, it seems that across the ocean, they've turned their backs on Putin. But as analysts point out, it's too early to award Trump the Hero's Medal. Donald, just like before, doesn't want Ukraine to win. He simply wants everything to end as quickly as possible along the current front line. He wants to pin the badge of a great peacemaker on his lapel and shift all subsequent problems into the hands of the Europeans.
Trump is acting according to his own logic. That is, Ukraine wants peace. It said, yes, let's stop at the line of demarcation. In other words, Ukraine is ready to take the shortest and simplest path. Russia does not want that. So, according to Trump's logic, pressure needs to be put on Russia, which is what happened in the form of these sanctions. At the same time, according to Trump's logic, if tomorrow the Russians say, okay, we're ready to negotiate a ceasefire, they will go to these negotiations and will be ready to lift sanctions and make some other concessions. He hopes that with the help of sanctions, he will be able to reach Putin's reason. He'll say, okay, we're losing, you're losing, let's look for ways to get out of this situation.
Trump, who thinks like a businessman, analysts say, failed to take into account the most important thing, the logic of Putin. The dictator doesn't care about the impoverishment of millions of Russians or the stagnation of the economy. He has his own priorities, and he is not going to change them, neither under the pressure of a stick nor a carrot.
He lives for war, you understand. He couldn't care less about the future of the Russian economy or oil prices. There will always be money for the front, money for the army, money for recruiting soldiers, and those very soldiers will be found. What has already been found for 3-4 years, they'll find more. That's all he thinks about, and he probably believes that everything is going perfectly. And as for what might collapse someday, that people will live badly, that there will be no gasoline or something else, well, they'll find gasoline for the tanks, and everyone else will just have to walk. That's basically his entire logic. He doesn't feel sorry for anyone. Not just Ukrainians, he doesn't feel sorry for Russians either. So really, what is there to be surprised about?
So far, the only one to react to the demonstrative turn across the ocean has been the unpredictable Dmitry Medvedev, whom analysts say isn't worth reacting to at all. On the contrary, not a single word from any official representatives. And most likely in Moscow, they will pretend that everything is going according to plan.
Obviously, they don't have any kind of response yet. Medvedev is playing the role of the bad cop and is being rude to Trump. But as we've already seen over the past year, Putin and Trump haven't been rude to each other. They are being polite, just teasing each other a little. That's why I don't think Putin will make any radical statements or insult Trump and say that we're now enemies. He'll probably just say something like, well, he got a bit carried away, we'll talk, we'll work things out. I don't think we're in for anything like him coming out, bursting into tears and saying, well, that's it, it's over for me. I renounce power, I lost the war, the new sanctions have crushed me.
Will Vladimir Putin be able to roll everything back, and will Trump fall for empty promises and stalling tactics? It's obvious to analysts that, unlike the contacts in Anchorage, the US president realized much faster that the desired showdown wasn't going to happen. But it seems the pendulum has swung. India and China, according to the media, will be forced to give up Russian black gold.
China's state oil companies have indeed suspended purchases of oil from Russia after U.S. sanctions against Rosneft and Lukoil. The companies have decided to refrain from new deals, at least in the short term. This will affect 30% of Russia's seaborne oil shipments to China, most of which are bought by private refineries. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has arrived in Japan as part of a series of visits to Asian countries. After Japan, Trump will head to South Korea, where he will meet with Chinese leader Xi Jinping to discuss the trade agreement between Washington and Beijing. Moreover, the US president intends to discuss Russia's war against Ukraine with the Chinese leader.
I would very much like China to help us with Russia. I will talk to him about how we can end the war between Russia and Ukraine, whether it's through oil, energy, or something else. And I think he will be very receptive.
The Republican added that he has a good relationship with the head of China, and he expects that the meeting scheduled for October 30th will go very well. In turn, the U.S. ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker, stated that the planned meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping will be crucial for ensuring China's cooperation on sanctions against Russia.
Obviously, the meeting with President Xi will be decisive in this matter. Are you aware that the Chinese are currently buying too much Russian oil and gas? They are providing the Russians with too many dual-use technologies, allowing them to continue this war, whether it's parts for drones or other technologies that can be used to prolong the conflict.
Experts tend to believe that the upcoming meeting between Donald Trump and Xi could become the most important diplomatic negotiations of this fall. They will determine the balance between the US and China, on which the further strategy regarding the war in Ukraine depends. Xi Jinping gave Putin more than he bargained for. Moscow was expecting support, but instead received a slap in the face in front of the whole world. The balance of power is shifting. Beijing is betting on itself, not on a doomed Russia. Tensions are rising. Now the Russian Federation is becoming a colony of the Celestial Empire, an unexpected turn. For the first time, the axis of power is clearly shifting. The details of Russia's public humiliation will soon be revealed.
Russia's main partner, the one helping it keep its economy afloat and continue the war in Ukraine.
What were they shouting? They were shouting that China is great. China is great. Throw the call to the Chinese, to the Chinese.
I eagerly anticipate and look forward to continuing close and ongoing contacts with President Vladimir Putin in various forms for the sake of the dynamic and long-term development of China-Russia relations.
But is that really the case? After all, at the same time, China denies selling weapons or components to Russia. And Chinese banks have stopped transactions with Russia because of the sanctions.
Pairs, threes, tens of millions of Chinese soldiers. That would be just what we need right now. Just what we need.
And why do you think so?
Why not?
Why? Do you really think only soldiers should die?
Oh, I look at the Belgorod region and can't help but think just how much we truly lack the presence of the Chinese People's Army.
Very often we hear statements from China that it has never sold weapons to Russia and that China supports Ukraine's territorial integrity and wants an end to the Russian-Ukrainian war.
Just 3 years ago, propagandists were rejoicing, saying, let Western companies leave, we'll buy everything from China.
Now we've bought a wonderful Chinese car, and honestly, it's absolutely amazing. It's really many times more affordable and significantly cheaper than the cars we used to buy before. I was able to buy myself 3 pairs of Gucci shoes, each for just 2,000 rubles. Wonderful, probably made somewhere in China as well. I hope also here in our country. Fake, of course. As a matter of principle, I now only buy fakes.
There's no need to even comment on what came of this. That very Chinese support for the Russian economy resulted in the bankruptcy of Russian manufacturers. And just look at what, for example, the soldiers are driving. They're driving Russian-made cars, right? You have to be a real patriot to drive a Patriot because it costs a fortune, breaks down all the time, and the spare parts are insanely expensive. That's why the guys drive Chinese vehicles. And now, do we need Russian motorcycles? No. Somehow that's how it turns out, right? There are very few Russian ones. There are no Russian ones at all. That's exactly the point, isn't it? There are no Russian motorcycles, for those who don't know.
If you look at the economic aspect of this issue, the Russian Federation is simply used as a basic sales market. When it comes to, well, not the military industry, but civilian engineering, it's practically, as they say, reduced to zero.
And Russia has literally turned into a raw materials appendage for China. By the way, Foreign Minister Lavrov came up with a very apt metaphor, calling Putin Xi Jinping's donkey.
As they say in the East, a guest is the master's donkey. Therefore, all the programs, of course, depend on the gracious proposals that the Chinese president and his team have made to our president.
Basically, all that China really needs from an economic standpoint is access to affordable and inexpensive raw materials. Which, by the way, the Russian Federation has quite a lot of. It's not just gas and oil, but also critical resources like lithium, timber, valuable and essential metals, and in fact gold as well. In other words, all the things from which China then produces goods for the entire world.
And this situation manifests itself in a wide variety of ways. China has officially approved new geographic maps on which part of Russian territory, the Bolshoi-Ussuriysky Island, is recognized as Chinese territory.
In fact, the Chinese have already settled huge swathes of Siberia and turned the territory into their own colonies.
The Chinese dragon is unlikely to stay on the sidelines simply because, by the way, it has certain historical claims to a significant part of our Far East, and that's a fact.
Of course, at first there was enthusiasm, but it gradually faded, and eventually we all realized that Asino had become a Chinese colony. It's simply a slave-owning enterprise, a slave camp, or a prison, if you will, where they put overseers in place to keep the workers in check, because there is still resentment no matter what. And the workers in Asino even staged a protest called Asino is not China. And they also regularly threaten that you won't be able to get a job anywhere in this town. Here's your black mark, so just sit quietly and keep your mouth shut for your 15 to 30,000.
They are very good at waiting. And this ability to wait, that's also about the integration of the Chinese into the territory of the Russian Federation. This, in fact, is already, for all intents and purposes, an annexation. In fact, if you pay attention on some Chinese maps, certain regions of the Russian Federation are already labeled with Chinese names. Well, listen, why would you even need to declare war for that, right?
Russian television is already showing segments about how to find a Chinese husband. And in Russian schools and government institutions, Chinese is being actively studied.
It's divided into two camps, those who want to study and those who are skeptical and say, why do we need Chinese? We're not planning to go anywhere. I answer them very simply, actually. I say, I'm not teaching you Chinese here, but rather using the Chinese language to make you think with your head. And that skill will always be useful.
Putin constantly tries to characterize relations with China as a strong friendship. But China's Xi Jinping practically spat in Putin's face by taking away from Russia that very great victory.
And just yesterday, my friend and the chairman of the PRC treated me to this kind of Peking duck. I'll be honest with you, there were two pieces there, and I thought I'd only eat one. You know what I mean, right? That's it. But I couldn't resist. I ate the second one too, you see, because it was just so delicious.
China and Russia, as the main theaters of military operations during World War II, made a decisive contribution to the victory over fascism and thus laid the cornerstone for the post-war world order.
China and Russia are neither friends nor partners. And here's what's important. As soon as China has enough motivation to limit its cooperation with the Russian Federation, believe me, it will do so. Russia, frankly speaking, has no other choice. Either be friends with China now, or that's it, an economic collapse, and as a consequence, political, military, and all other collapses at once.
It turns out that China is not helping Russia save its economy or win the war at all, but is simply taking advantage of its weakness to seize its resources and strengthen its influence in Asia.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
It seems the Far East is slipping out of Moscow's control for good. While the Kremlin is at war, China is extending its economic tentacles. North Korean migrants are changing the region's demographic landscape. Moscow is just watching and doing nothing. Does this mean the Kremlin will simply give up the Far East, or does it have no choice? Find out all the details right now. Russia is losing the Far East. Not officially, but in reality.
Without any exaggeration, the Far East has become the most important factor in strengthening Russia's position in the world, our flagship in the new global economic reality.
While the Kremlin is preoccupied with war, the region is quietly being divided by its neighbors, China and North Korea.
I would call it something like, a creeping takeover, a creeping migration. In my opinion, for now, control over the Far East still remains in Moscow's hands, of course. But there are more and more Chinese people there. They are playing an increasingly significant role in the economy. Well, as they say, today they play a big role in the economy and tomorrow they'll play a big role in politics.
Over 1 trillion rubles in investments from China. It sounds like aid, but all of it revolves around trade, not the development of the region.
China needs to use Russian resources on the cheap, and accordingly they will have that opportunity. And that's exactly why I firmly believe that this ongoing economic dependence of these particular regions on China will only continue to grow and expand further in the foreseeable future.
Also, the Chinese have long ceased to be guests in Russia.
The Far East is simply not needed, so it means it should be given to the Chinese. That's exactly what they already want to do. The Chinese can just come in easily and that's it, and no one here will resist anymore. There will be no one left to resist, and nothing to resist for.
According to various estimates, up to 2 million people live from Vladivostok to the Urals.
So to speak, these territories are being settled by the Chinese and in different ways. This includes both the migrants themselves as well as those involved in mixed marriages from which children are born. Right? And accordingly, these regions are becoming more and more closely connected with China.
Now about North Korea. In the Far East, just in the past year, more than 15,000 North Koreans have officially arrived, and unofficially, up to 50,000. And that's not the limit yet. 153,000 new labor contracts have already been ordered.
Russia doesn't have enough of its own workforce today, because so many people have been killed in the war, and accordingly demographic problems still remain, so yes, there aren't enough local people. And North Korea, in this sense, is an excellent supplier of labor resources, because the people are disciplined and accordingly know how to march in step in every sense of the word.
So it turns out that Moscow has handed over the region for temporary use. But why is that?
Putin needs people whom, as he sees it, are easy to control. It doesn't matter even if it's not him personally, but through others. That's why he's confident that these people won't start a revolution, won't protest against Moscow's actions. He thinks these are very convenient people, and it would be ideal if Russia were populated precisely by such convenient people. After all, you never know what might happen with your own people.
But everything comes at a price. And the longer the Kremlin turns a blind eye, the more important the question becomes. Who is really running the Far East?
In reality today, it is clear that Russia, of course, has become a vassal of China. This means that Russia is now largely dependent on China, which holds significant influence over Russia's actions and decisions. China primarily uses this relationship to put pressure on Europe, leveraging Russia as a means to advance its own interests and strategic objectives. And we understand that the global confrontation is certainly not between Russia and NATO, not at all, but between China and the United States and China and Europe. In this case, Russia today is like a loyal guard dog that faithfully obeys its master's every command.
So, what happens next? Is there still a chance for the Far East to return to Moscow's real control, or will the influence of China and North Korea only continue to grow?
The influence of China and North Korea will only keep increasing, and accordingly, China will decide for itself whether it needs to formally annex all of this, or if for now, full economic control is enough, and tomorrow that could turn into full political control.
It seems that while Putin is focused on seizing other people's territories, he is gradually losing his own. And what's ironic is that these territories are being taken not by enemies, but by the Kremlin's own allies. What do you think about the upcoming meeting between Trump and Xi? We look forward to your comments. There's more to come, stay tuned for the main news, and don't forget to like. Wishing you peaceful skies above.